We've got a comedian, we've got a scholar, we've got a new format for this show. This is Off the Record. Stick around. All right, well, this is Off the Record, and as I mentioned, you might have seen me tweet about it. We are going to tweak the format of this show. Once draft season ended, kind of started feeling a little stale, like we were forcing the issue with players. So since we have great guests each week, and that guest list is going to continue, we decided to do something a little bit more fun, entertaining, fast-paced. Show should be a little shorter. We're going to do 5 rounds. Each guest is going to have 90 seconds to state their case, and then the Lord, Tehol Beddict, is going to make a ruling who wins each round. So I'd like to welcome in our guest this week. First, I want to say Mr. Pete Overzet of Fantasyland, the Fantasyland podcast on RotoViz. He also does a bunch of other things, but I'm going to let you go ahead and explain that.
Oh, yeah. So I host the Fantasyland podcast for RotoViz. I'm also a co-host of the Fantasy Football Comedy Hour. And I'm now I'm this guy's agent, Pete Manzanelli. He's this new voice in the DFS industry. You got to check him out as well.
Yeah, if you don't know what he's talking about, go check out Pete's YouTube channel, and you'll see Pete's picks each week with his alter ego, and it's definitely something worth checking out. I don't know how to introduce our second guest. He is the first repeat we've had on this show, and that was because we had a lot of people overwhelmingly requesting he return. And I want to bring back John Laub into the mix. Thank you for joining us again. Can you please kindly tell everybody who you are and where they can find you, in case they're unfamiliar?
So first, I'm shocked. I usually don't get a second invite to a party, so I'm kind of blown away that I've been invited back, but thank you very much. This is my 19th season of working with the Football Diehards, doing their weekly cheat sheet of sleepers and long shots. And I've been playing fantasy football for 28 years. And the first year I'm doing a podcast called the DFS Dudes, which is available on Podomatic every Thursday night.
Finally, the Lord, Mr. Beddict, the judge, the jury.
Ye who have gathered here today to bear witness to the judge, Lord Beddict and Laub. I forced your comeback. You're arguably the greatest guest we've ever had. I ensured it. I made it happen. I made it happen behind the scenes. And this is what it is. You're the captain of the debate team. We need to see you in full effect once again. And we're prepared. Now we have a comedian to step to you. I'm excited. I'm very pumped up about this.
All right, so let's kick it off with round 1. We're going to go with a quarterback question. Now, the premise for this show is going to be these guys are going to make an argument for said player. Why you should be convinced by their argument that this is the player for you, that you should be seeking whether to pick up on waivers, whether to try to trade for, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to start round 1 with the quarterbacks, and Pete has Carson Wentz. Mr. Laub has Jameis Winston. And Pete, 90 seconds on the clock. You're up.
All right. Yeah. So what's interesting to me about Carson Wentz is I feel like he still has a stigma attached to him. I mean, he was drafted 2nd overall, but he spent all offseason as pretty much the presumptive 3rd-string quarterback. It was going to be Bradford before the trade. There was even, after Bradford got traded, it was going to be Chase Daniel. People were saying he was going to redshirt for the entire season. And then he comes out to this hot start, and I think people are having a hard time shaking this stigma that he could actually be really good. And he's completed 64.7% of his pass attempts. He hasn't thrown an interception. He's had 5 touchdown passes. And then his kind of core around him is really good. Jordan Matthews, very underrated. I'm going to talk about him later. DGB looks like he's going to grow into the number 2 role there. It looks like they're kind of phasing out Ryan Matthews a bit in favor of Wendell Smallwood, who's an explosive pass-catching back. So everything points in the direction of the Eagles being really explosive and Wentz being good. I just don't see any negatives here. And then the cherry on top is their schedule is super good. 3 of the next 4 weeks, they have the Lions, the Redskins, and the Cowboys. So I see the good times just continuing to roll. And this bye week is probably like the last chance to get in on him before everyone realizes, hey, Carson Wentz is actually good.
Well, my esteemed colleague made a very nice presentation for Carson Wentz. I think he's been drinking a little bit tonight, because there's no question in my mind that the guy you want is Jameis Winston. And it really comes down to perception versus reality. Jameis Winston is on pace for 32 touchdowns, 4,400 yards, and 3 rushing touchdowns. The guy is playing good football, but let's look deeper. He lost on the road against Arizona, a good defense after they lost to New England. They were pissed off down in the Valley of the Sun, and they hit him hard, and it was a no-win possible situation. Then the Super Bowl champs come in Denver, and they are just like Hannibal going through the Alps. They are on a mission, that Denver defense, and they destroyed him. Now let's look at the next 6 games that my man Jameis Winston has. This is pathetic. He has the Panthers, the 49ers, the Raiders, the Falcons, and the Bears, baby. Those are easy fantasy points. My grandmother could throw a touchdown in those games. And when we get to the playoffs, my friends, he's got the Saints twice, baby. The Saints twice. How can it not be Winston? I rest my case.
Oh, man. You still have 5 seconds to go, too. I think I got to shorten the timer on this to 60 seconds. All right. Well, that woke up everybody in my neighborhood. Judge, jury, Lord, what's your ruling on round 1?
Yeah, you know, I had some strong points by Peter there. I was going to give him kudos for pointing out the schedule there, and I was kind of intrigued by that, this and that. Yes, I've read all about these stats, but Laub's enthusiasm is off the charts. I don't know. I shouldn't have had Peter go. I should have let Laub go first to give Peter a taste of what's to come, so he can be prepared for the kind of intensity this man brings. So let's move on to number 2. We're going to go with Winston and Laub in round 1.
All right. We're going to move on to round 2 now. We're going to talk some running backs. Laub's going to start it off. He's got Isaiah Crowell, and Pete O has Kristen Michael.
My colleague is going to argue in favor of Kristen Michael, and I'm going to tell you he's not going to be correct on this one. And I love Kristen Michael this year. But let me tell you about my man Isaiah Crowell. He looks like one of Billy's boys on the march to the sea. He is running with anger and purpose and leaving devastation absolutely in his wake. He is just destroying opponents. He is second in the NFL, folks, second with 394 yards rushing. And what's spectacular about it, 6.5 yards per carry. That is Jim Brown numbers, Barry Sanders numbers, and the incomprehensible Earl Campbell. He's only scored 3 times because he's playing for that pathetic Cleveland Brown offense. But let me tell you something. I am a fan of Hugh Jackson. I have studied this man. I have watched this man coach offense. He made a fantasy productive running back out of Darren McFadden. He did it with Jeremy Hill and Giovanni Bernard, and he is getting the best out of the Alabama State product, the 511, 225-pound monster. I love Crowell this year. He's going to get fed the pigskin. He's going to run the football. When it gets cold, Jackson is going to feed him, and they have no one else who can produce points and move the football. I'm all in on Crowell. He's playing great football.
Learning the second one.
All right, okay, here's the thing about Kristen Michael. This guy has come, he's awoke, he's awakening, it's happened. My colleague is going to try to tell you Isaiah Crowell is a thing, but everything has gone perfectly right for him. Every time Pete Carroll says Thomas Rawls is coming back, he says 4 to 6 weeks. I swear to God, every week it's 4 to 6 weeks. It's like the little kids in a car asking, Dad, are we there yet? No, we are not there yet. Thomas Rawls is not playing again for a long time. Kristen Michael averaged 3.2 yards per carry in week 4 and 3.3 yards after contact per carry. Okay, I know what you're saying. Spiller, ProSize, they're eventually going to eat into that workload. But I say bogus, all right? He had 5 catches for 32 yards last week. That makes him a true bell cow working in the passing game. They have a top 3 schedule over the next 3 weeks. They're going against Atlanta, Arizona, and New Orleans. Okay, how many bell cows are there in top offenses in the NFL? Le'Veon Bell, David Johnson, okay? And now there's crickets because the next guy in line is Kristen Michael. He's the next great bell cow. He's going to make Seattle great again. No questions.
Oh, man, you guys are coming in under the gun. I love it. Beddict, you got a tough one here. Your hometown favorite versus favorite guest.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I've been a feed the crow for years. I don't know, he was undrafted. He was the star at Georgia. The way this played out, they got him undrafted. He's beat out Terrance West, the second round pick. I'm a huge fan. I'm glad to see him actually getting the carries. He was an all-time steal this year in fantasy drafts, going late as usual. People are reaping the benefits, including myself. But we're going to go with Kristen Michael here. Hero stepped it up and came correct. He lobbed there, and I got to respect him.
We are now tied.
I was convinced before anything was spoken. Yes. Thank you.
I'm going to appeal the decision.
I don't know. I'm like a Pavlovian response that I know the judge rewards yelling, so I just gonna have to continue with that.
Well, you're up first in round 3. We're gonna move to wide receivers now. As you mentioned shortly before, with your quarterback comes his wide receiver. That is Jordan Matthews. You're gonna be taking on Stefon Diggs.
It's funny because I feel like he has a lot of parallels with Wentz and that he has a stigma. I mean, it is so hilarious and exhausting at this point that people are still talking about where Jordan Matthews wins, as if him catching passes from the slot or the outside matters. Sorry, it doesn't matter. We're playing a fake game that has to do with fantasy points. I don't care where he is racking up those points, and he is racking them up. He is a top 15 wide receiver, and yet people still view him as this fringe wide receiver 3 type, and it's ridiculous. He has a 25% market share of the receiving yard in a prolific offense. That's 12th among wide receivers. So just on target share alone, he's top 12 in the league. I mean, when you are chasing fantasy points, you can't chase touchdowns. Those have a lot of volatility, but you can chase targets and who is getting the majority of them. Jordan Matthews crosses off all the boxes, and he's getting used all over the field. That week 1, he caught a deep bomb from Wentz in the end zone. It's not just the intermediary stuff. So, guys, it doesn't matter if he plays in the slot, but you film grinders can keep nitpicking that. And, the other funny thing about Jordan Matthews, going back to the stigma thing, is if he wasn't in – okay, I got the bell.
Now, my friend wants to discuss targets, and I'm all about targets. Stefon Diggs is the main man in Minnesota. He's got 33 targets, my friends, in 4 games, and he's made 25 catches. That's a 76% catch rate. I love this guy. He's kind of like the ninja who slits your throat while you're silently sleeping in bed. You have no idea he's on top of you so quickly. I love these T.Y. Hiltons, these Antonio Browns. Everyone wants A.J. Green and Julio Jones. Give me the silent ninja. He's on top of you and in the end zone before you even know it. And you know what? He's got Sam Bradford. Believe it or not, Sam Bradford is playing competent football right now. It looks like he has mastered Norv Turner's offense in 3 weeks. And let's look ahead. 3 of the next 5 games, my man has the Bears, the Lions, and the Redskins. Those are easy pickings. And when we go to the playoffs, I'll take them against the Jags, the Colts, the Packers, and the Bears any day. Forget about last night. The Giants are a good defense. That was a snot-out game last night. They beat each other up. We have to look forward in fantasy football. Diggs is the man.
Diggs coming in, knocking up your wife, slitting your throat without you even knowing it, all this stuff. That's what got me going with Diggs. I'm a huge fan. Jordan Matthews, we shall see. He has been really solid his first 2 years and probably will continue again here. I just think Diggs has a little more upside. And then the playoff talk those last 3 weeks or last 4 weeks or whatever, I think, who did you make? It was the Saints in there. Somebody, the Colts, somebody just garbage. The Bears secondary is trash. So I'm going to lean Diggs. No Peterson there. They're not running like 30 times a game, although I do like McKinnon, what's going on there. But we're going to go with Diggs there just because I'm a fan, and that's what I'm going to do. And the ninja line, sleeping with the wife, cutting throats. That's what I'm about.
Back and forth we go, 2-1. Laub's out in the lead. He's going to start round 4. We're sticking with the wide receivers, only this time we're talking about people to avoid. So Mr. Overzet has Randall Cobb. Mr. Laub has Larry Fitzgerald. Tell us why you don't want Larry Fitzgerald.
All right, so we should all have a moment of silence for the great Hall of Famer Larry Fitzgerald, because his career is coming to an end. I know people are going to wax poetically about this veteran wide receiver and the savvy in the route running. But let's be realistic here. The man dropped off the charts the second half of last season. He had 196 less receiving yards. He went from 12.8 yards per catch to 9.4 in the second half of the season, and from 7 touchdowns to 2. But you know what I'm really worried about with my man Larry? It's got to be Carson Palmer. We've seen these quarterbacks. Can I say Peyton Manning? My man, one of the great quarterbacks of all time. He was absolutely abysmal last year. And look at what he did to Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders. They are so good, those two. They are catching passes from Paxton Lynch and from, the Northwestern kid, Trevor Siemian. And they're producing better than they did with Peyton Manning. I digress. So let me go back. Larry Fitzgerald. The man, Carson Palmer, is at the end of his ropes. He is missing wide open guys. The offense is not clicking. Plus, I have no confidence in Drew Stanton if he has to come in here and play quarterback. They also have John Brown and still Michael Floyd with huge upside. Get rid of my man Larry Fitz. Say goodbye. Find someone in your league who loves him. Dump him for a young guy with fresh legs the second half of the season. I love you, Larry, but you're not on any of my teams. I'm saying goodbye.
I really love how you did embrace the somber moment. I'm guessing that was your library voice, but you just made me realize with all these, I've never seen Larry Fitzgerald in more commercials. So is that kind of like the swan song for him? All of a sudden he's like national spokesman right behind Peyton Manning, and it just made me think of the sad commercial when he's calling his mother just to leave a message on her answering machine. I don't know if anybody's seen that one, but anyway.
I like that commercial, but it's the end.
Yeah, Marshawn Lynch, his last year, he had more commercials than anybody any time in his whole career, argued the worst year of his career, of his life, and he's getting all the commercials. It just seems to go down that way, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I don't know.
I think that's like the new curse. All right, so Mr. Overzet, Randall Cobb, another big name wide receiver. You say get away from him. Why?
Yeah, so my colleague had a little moment of silence for Larry Fitzgerald, and instead I'm going to have us all gather around for a little bit of story time. And it's fitting that we're talking about the Cardinals here and the Packers, because I want to take us back to January 2016, when a curse was placed on the Packers offense. And in that game, the one and only Jeff Janis had an incredible 145-yard, 2-touchdown game in the playoffs. He had 101 yards on one game-winning or tying drive by the Packers. And what I'm going to hypothesize here is that the Packers offense has been cursed since that very moment. Ever since Jeff Janis was not in the offense, stretching the field, Rodgers has not looked the same. And for whatever reason, the Packers don't like Jeff Janis. And Randall Cobb, to come back around to this, is the casualty in all of this. Randall Cobb is firing when the Packers offense is firing on all cylinders. In the years when he was getting the red zone target, that was when he was a top wide receiver. That is not happening this year. Rodgers can barely sustain Jordy Nelson as a top wide receiver, much less a second or third wide receiver. And until Jeff Janis or a field stretcher is reinstated, Randall Cobb is a casualty and will no longer be relevant in fantasy football. Last week, they had a get-right spot at home versus the Lions where they put up a ton of points, and Randall Cobb had 3 targets. He's dead.
Right. They're both great arguments. They're both so true. The only thing that's saving Cobb right now is he still has Aaron Rodgers. I'm wondering all year, I'm like, what is wrong with Cobb? You had people pointing out, like, everybody put him in their top 10, raised him up. After Jordy went down, you thought the increased targets would be a given, that he would just go off, because I thought he was kind of a star player. He's not that. I don't know what has happened to this guy. He just lacks the explosiveness or something, or maybe I was just wrong about him all along. Guys like Doug Baldwin and these guys like that, these pedestrians have surpassed this guy with ease and are far superior players at this point. I don't know what's going on with him. But if Carson Delhomme is going to miss any serious time, or if he's really done after being an MVP candidate last year, I mean, that's just crazy to me. I mean, can I really buy that Carson is done? But then on the other hand, the Cardinals have all those other weapons too. It's a very tough call for me, man. Is there any way I can do a draw? I mean, I'm very confused and very torn in between. I mean, Cobb has been letting me down. Fitz has at least done something thus far. I mean, it's a very tough call for me. I don't like either of them. I don't own either of them. I don't know what to do right now as a judge. I mean, this is kind of a mistrial. I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to say.
So you're calling it a draw, which is fine. That means we still have a race. We have one question left. It's the head-to-head question. Before we get to that, though, we're going to leave you with a little bit of suspense. I'm going to bring in the doctor since Mr. Laub was mentioning Carson Palmer and his attachment to Larry Fitzgerald. Carson Palmer is in the news, so let's bring in Dr. Selene Parekh with his Week 4 injury report. Let's go over some names this week. We had 2 huge injuries to quarterbacks.
Obviously, we all know the NFL is trying to get really a lot better about diagnosing these concussions with any kind of head trauma. There is a third-party independent person evaluating these guys on the sideline to get pulled into the locker room, and both of them fell into the concussion protocol. With a short week, obviously Palmer's not going to make it in time for Thursday. Newton, it's really a day-to-day basis. If by Thursday or Friday he doesn't clear, I'd be very surprised if he clears by Sunday. So keep an eye on this on a day-to-day basis. But every single concussion is different, so there's no real timeline on these. They get evaluated every day, and when their neuropsychological testing returns back to baseline, that's when they're cleared to play.
Something that affects me more personally, New York Jets star wide receiver Eric Decker.
So what he has is a partial tear of his rotator cuff muscles. The rotator cuff are a group of 4 muscles that attach to the upper shoulder, help you move your arm up and out. He's got a partial tear. It doesn't sound like he's going to have surgery at this point, but it does look like they're going to give him time to heal without surgery. Now, the problem is that can take 2 weeks or it could take 8 weeks, and we just don't know what it's going to be. So it's going to be a week-to-week basis for him. There's been some discussion about putting him on the IR, but he hasn't made it there yet. But don't be surprised if he makes it down to the IR list or if he ends up having surgery later on in the season.
Des Bryant with the Cowboys, what's the status with his knee?
Yeah, so a lot has gone back and forth of what's really going on with Dez. He has some kind of fracture in the knee, in the shin bone, into the knee joint itself. The problem is that Jason Garrett said it was a hairline fracture. And so everybody, including myself, said, wait a minute, hairline fracture, he's out at least 4 weeks, maybe 6 weeks. Well, it turns out that might not have been true. It sounds like he may have had more of what's called a compression fracture, where the inner bone kind of squeezes together. In that scenario, he could be back this week. It really just depends on his pain level. So he's not ruled out for the Sunday. I think it's going to be a day-to-day thing. If you don't see him this Sunday, I think he'll be certainly back week 6.
Somebody that is coming back, Kenneth Dixon. Are you expecting him to be back 100% full workload or ease back into things as we saw with Jamal Charles in week 4?
Yeah, I think it's a whole different ballgame. This was a sprained MCL, happened in preseason on August 27th. He's had adequate time for this to heal. I think he comes right out of the gates running. I don't think they're going to ease him back in.
Okay, and then speaking of MCL sprains, CJ Fedorowicz, I was big on him. I should have held and been patient. This is his year 3. That's usually when tight ends start to emerge. He just had his breakout performance and then subsequently injured himself at the same time. So is this something long-term, short-term?
I think it's short-term. I mean, the fact that he got back into the game, later in the second half, I think he's going to be fine. I think you'll see him suited up and good to go this weekend.
Just a few other names to rifle through. We saw Sammy Watkins on the injured list now. Do you think that's it for the season, done? Or do you think he can?
Yeah, I think this is a big deal. It sounds like he's going to head towards a second surgery. There's a lot of things that can happen in that second surgery, and look for him to be really held back before they let him get back on the playing field. So I think his season's over.
2 Eagles, Ryan Matthews, Zach Ertz.
Ertz, I think he'll be fine. He's been out for, 2 to 3 weeks with that dislocated rib. I think he'll be fine. Matthews, same thing.
Trevor Siemian.
Non-throwing shoulder, AC sprain. He's going to be fine. Good to go.
And finally, Jeremy Kerley, who is subtly fantasy relevant.
Yeah, so Jeremy Kerley has an ankle injury. Seems like a sprain. There's not really much more information on it. He was limited in practice today. He didn't practice yesterday. I anticipate he'll be fine for the weekend.
Good stuff as always, Doc. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Hopefully you are keeping everybody's lineups healthy in fantasy. All right, so that wraps up the doctor's injury report for week 5. Hope that helps your lineup setting this week. Now we get to the final question. This is the most compelling argument. I think this is why we saved this question for last. It is 2 running backs in the same backfield, going head-to-head.
My good friend, Pete, is going to tell you that you should invest in Terrance West in the backfield. But that would kind of be like betting on the Egyptians to rule the world in about 5 years from now. It is a long shot. I'm going to tell you about Terrance West. I saw the guy play live at the Rent in Connecticut when he was at Townsend, and he ate us up. And in the pre-draft process, I had him ranked very high in my top 10. I liked him coming out. But you know what, gentlemen? He's not an NFL back. He was impressive last week. I can't deny that. But he played the Redskins, folks. They were not the Redskins. I'm sorry, he played the Raiders. They're absolutely terrible on defense. So I'm going to make the case that it is clearly Kenneth Dixon here. He was my number 2 back in the pre-draft process. I loved him coming out of Louisiana Tech. He's a dual threat ball carrier. He probably had the best hands in the entire draft. Forget about Kenyon Drake. Kenyon Drake was on his coattails. Kenneth Dixon was such a good pass catcher. He dominated the offense of Louisiana Tech. Look at the percentage of carries he got and the number of yards that he dominated in 4 years in that offense. He showed us in the preseason that he can compete at the NFL level. If he had not gotten hurt during that preseason game, I believe that he would have opened the season up as the starter. There was no way that Justin Forsett was going to be the starter the entire year. Hey, even the coaching staff was surprised that Terrance West played so well last week. What? The coaching staff was shocked? I mean, that's just kind of crazy. You want to put a guy out there and believe in him. Hey, the kid can play. What did I know? What is that all about? But I'll tell you why. It's Mark Trestman. There is no question Mark Trestman wants to throw to his running backs. And let me tell you something. In 3 games, Terrance West only has 4 receptions. He can't do it. Kenneth Dixon is going to be the pass catcher. He's going to be the main back. Invest in Dixon. I rest my case.
All right. This is to tie it.
I like my colleague here evoking the Egyptians in his analogy, but what I will say to Kenneth Dixon believers is this is like assuming that we could have a colony on Mars in 5 years, which I will say it's more likely the Egyptians are in charge in 5 years. I mean, Kenneth Dixon owners are going to be like Matt Damon in The Martian trying to make food out of their own shit, if that's the trajectory they're on here. Now, the thing about John and where he's falling trap is this is a classic case of fantasy wanting. Everyone wants Kenneth Dixon to be good. All the pre-draft nicks were like, I like this guy, Kenneth Dixon. He's the top 5 running back in the class. And yet what none of them will remind you is that he went in the 4th round. He fell to the 4th round. Kenyon Drake, he went in the 2nd round. Teams actually put their money where their mouth is with other running backs. Do you know who also went in the 4th round last year? Buck Allen, also on the Ravens. And do you know how long it took for him to get touches in the Ravens backfield last year? It wasn't until week 10 or 11 when Forsett went down, when they finally wanted to invest in carries in their 4th round draft pick. To think that Kenneth Dixon is just going to waltz in and take over is foolish thinking. The Ravens are stubborn. They've been holding on to Forsett, a 30-year-old running back, giving him carry after carry after carry. So what happens when he goes down and Terrance West takes over? He rushes for 21 attempts, 113 yards. By pure inertia alone, the Ravens would be idiots not to continue to give him the rock. They are stubborn with these 4th round draft picks. I do not see Dixon taking over West unless West gets hurt.
You got your work cut out for you, sir. This is why you're the Lord, though. You want to wear the title, you got to make these tough decisions.
Yeah, last time I was bathing in the Nile River in Egypt, I was kind of disgusted by what's going on over there. But, I'm considering I have Terrance West in my top. I had him high last week. and I have him high again. I like the way he runs, but he never has the numbers like you think he would have. I kind of like the way he runs. I like the point Peter made about the fantasy wanting. It kind of reminds me of like the James White thing with the Patriots like a few years back. Everybody said he's going to kill it. He's going to go off. He's going to do this. He's going to do that. And they said it this year, the same thing. He's going to do this with what's his name out, blah, 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 blah. He's garbage. He's worth nothing. I just need to see more from Dixon. I'm not as educated as Senior Laub here is on Dixon's college at Louisiana Tech. I mean, he dominated the offense at Louisiana Tech. I believe he mentioned his grandmother earlier. I'm sure she could be the focal point of Louisiana Tech's offense. I'm not sure what that means. What I do know is Terrance West has a little bit of pedigree. He looked pretty good last week. I mean, this could quickly become a timeshare, but I personally am having to lean with Terrance West.
Woo.
I like him going forward.
All right, so we are going to finish our first crack at this game with the tie. I want to thank you guys both for being such great guests and gentlemen for joining and going through this initial run. Hopefully this was a success and we can take some good and take some bad from this. We have parting gifts for our studio audience, so everybody will be leaving with something. I would love for you guys to go ahead and plug your stuff again. Mr. Overzet, I'm going to start with you.
Yeah, Fantasyland podcast. We have a new episode coming out later this week, actually. So, check it out. It's everything you didn't know you wanted to know about fantasy sports. It's a nice little change of pace from all the start, sit, buy low, sell high stuff. And, the Fantasy Football Comedy Hour as well. You can find that on iTunes. We record about once a month. And, again, no start, sit stuff there. We just try to joke around and have a good time.
Nice. And John?
Sure. I'm always on Football Diehards every week with my second opinion cheat sheet. And I have a new podcast this year called DFS Dudes. It's on Podomatic and on footballdiehards.com, and it's available on Thursday nights.
Awesome. I want to thank you guys. I also just want to remind everybody to check out our partners, Friends with Fantasy Benefits, Fantasy Assembly, and also Dynasty Football Factory. Don't forget to check out RevoLabels.com, custom fantasy rings. And if you're an advertiser and you want one of the 17 members of our audience to check out your product, check out the networks looking for content as well. We're here. Let us know. Next week, we're going to be joined by an NFL.com writer. I'm not going to reveal the name yet. And we're not sure his opponent yet, so we'll have to play it by ear, but check for the tweets. You can follow us, Nickel Press TV, on Twitter, and make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel, Nickel Press TV. Thanks for tuning in. Hope everybody had a good time, and we'll see you next time.